In this explainer, we're going to zoom in on a single speculative week in November 2025. We're piecing together a snapshot of a world being reshaped right before our eyes by powerful personalities, new tech, and a complete rewriting of the old rules. Let's get into it. All right, let's just start with this quote right here from former White House strategist Steve Bannon. Now, this isn't just some political hot take, right? This is the frame for everything we're about to look at. It suggests we're not just watching the news unfold, we're watching a world being actively, intentionally molded by one very powerful person. So, where do we start? Well, with the central actor himself, President Trump. And what we're seeing is this incredibly fast-paced, direct style on the world stage. Think about it. This is a leadership style that's all about speed and personal handshakes. Traditional, slow-moving protocol? Not so much. And just look at this. In a matter of days, he's on this whirlwind tour across Asia. It's a blur of activity. First, he's in Malaysia, meeting with Southeast Asian leaders. Boom. Next stop, Tokyo, for talks with Japan's new prime minister. And then he wraps it up in South Korea. This is diplomacy at maximum velocity. Okay, now this is where it gets really, really interesting, because it shows you the sheer unpredictability of it all. You've got this tale of two neighbors. On the one hand, South Korea, they walk away with a pretty sweet trade deal, lower tariffs on their cars. Great. But then you have Canada. They get slapped with an extra 10% levy on their goods. And why? Not because of some huge trade war, but seemingly because of a local TV ad that annoyed someone. So you see, policy seems to be driven just as much by personal deals as it is by personal feelings. And behind all of this, there's some serious hard power at play. Look at this number. We're not just talking about handshakes and trade spats. While all that diplomacy was happening, more than 10% of America's entire deployed naval assets were being moved to sit right off the coast of Venezuela. That is a significant military buildup. It's a pretty clear message. So, that leads to the next big question, right? How is the rest of the world supposed to react to all this? I mean, when one of the biggest players on the board starts ignoring the old rules, while everyone else has to learn to play a whole new game. And that's the core of it, really. This shift away from, stable, predictable alliances to these unpredictable one-on-one deals, it's forcing a massive strategic rethink everywhere. The old playbook, it's basically useless now. Other countries are realizing they just can't rely on the old certainties anymore. And here's the proof. Nations are not just sitting around waiting to see what happens. No way. They're actively hedging their bets. You see, Japan, they're ramping up their defense spending, hitting that 2% of GDP target 2 years ahead of schedule. Then you've got South Korea getting the green light from the US to build their own nuclear-powered submarines. And it's not just about military power. Look at Brazil. They're racing to lock in new partnerships, trying to finally get that big trade deal with the European Union over the line. What's the takeaway? They're all building up their own power and their own networks. This new political reality, it's not just shaking up how nations deal with each other. It's completely redrawing the lines between Washington and the world's most powerful companies. And the flashpoint for all this? You guessed it, artificial intelligence. First, let's just take a moment to absorb the sheer scale of the money and power we're dealing with. $5 trillion. That's the market value NVIDIA hit, all driven by this insane AI boom. It's almost hard to wrap your head around a number that big. And it's not just NVIDIA. Look at this. Microsoft and Apple also just blasted past the $4 trillion mark. This kind of concentration of corporate power, it's something we've just never seen before. So what happens when you have that much money and that much power? Well, this is what happens. You get a very public, very clear alignment of corporate wealth with political power. You have the CEO of the world's most valuable company saying he's incredibly proud to help fund a new White House ballroom. And he's pledging to get on board with the president's Reindustrialize America agenda. This is a whole new era of corporate political partnership playing out right in the open. For our final section, we're bringing the story back home. Because, of course, these massive global power shifts, they don't just happen in a vacuum. They create these intense political shockwaves right back here in the United States, and they ripple all the way down to the local level. And it gets direct, it gets personal. We're seeing the White House threatening to withhold federal funds from New York City. And we're not talking about pocket change here. That's 6.4% of the city's entire budget. The power of the federal purse is being used as a straight-up political weapon. And this is the result. You've got this high-stakes local election that basically becomes a perfect symbol for the whole national political divide. The New York City mayoral race turns into a proxy war. You've got a progressive candidate, Zohar Mamdani, on one side, and the massive, looming influence of a hostile White House on the other.
Which, brings us right back to where we started. When you see this level of influence, both at home and around the world, the big question starts getting asked out loud. Is a third term, something that was once totally unthinkable, is it now a real possibility? That whole idea has officially moved from the fringe into the mainstream conversation.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The events of just 1 week in this speculative November 2025, they paint a picture of a world that is completely in flux. The old rulebooks for diplomacy, for corporate behavior, even for political term limits, they're all being challenged, if not thrown out entirely. And that leaves us with the ultimate question. In a world of strong men and rapid, constant disruption, who gets to write the rules of the future?